Welcome to a Thursday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm your host, John Gonzalez, alongside our NBA insider, Bill Ryder. And look at this, joined once again by the coach, Avery Johnson. Gentlemen, how are things? Good to see both of you.
What's up, John? Hey, coach.
Everything's good, guys. Excited. Playoff time.
Playoff time has begun. Later in the show, we're going to get into Bill's final awards ballot. There was some conversation, Avery, about that earlier in the week. So Bill finally put it together. You can tell him everything he got wrong.
Don't get mad at me, coach. Don't get too mad at me.
But first, the Eastern Conference play-in went down last night. We're going to start with that Sixers Heat game. Sixers squeaked out a 1-point win over the Heat, 105-104. They were down 14. They have won just 3 of their 17 games when trailing at the half this season. That was one of them. Avery, let's start with you. What were your impressions of that game? I thought the Sixers were cooked at the half.
Yeah, I thought they were cooked, but, when Jimmy Butler injured his knee, and it didn't look good at all. And you got tangled there with Kelly Oubre on a little bit of a shot fake on a fast break. I would say in hindsight, I thought he was just going to go up and lay the ball up. I didn't even think he needed a pump fake at that point. But fortunately, he pump faked and got a little tangled up there with his knee. And just really unfortunate for the Miami Heat because they were actually playing some really good basketball. They hurt the Philadelphia 76ers with their little matchup zone. They rotated between the 2-3 and the 1-2-2. And it just froze the Philadelphia 76ers. They looked like they had never seen a zone before.
Yeah, they did.
But the game turned around in the third quarter, and Embiid and Nicholas Batum, they were amazing.
Bill,
the Batum game.
The Jimmy thing, the Batum game I definitely want to get into, but just because Avery brought it up, he's got an MCL strain. He's going to be reevaluated weeks from now. He's going to be out weeks, according to various reports. Bill, he played 40 minutes with an MCL injury.
The guy is the toughest dude in the NBA. This might sound counterintuitive or hot takey, but I think it's legitimate. I'll be curious what you guys think. Obviously, it's getting attention that Jimmy Butler went down, but I think it should be in the context of, for me, both of those teams before Butler got hurt were legitimate, at least Eastern Conference contenders. Now, you want to end up on the Knicks side of the bracket. You don't want to play the Celtics, which obviously now the Heat have to play for, but it's huge news, obviously. But I think it's beyond bad news for a single star. I think the Heat were good enough to make a deep run, even to push the Celtics if Jimmy Butler were healthy. And the fact that he's hurt isn't just significant for that game. I think it takes out, even though they're a play-in team, a Heat squad that were absolutely good enough, and I know we saw it last year, to be a real threat, to be a real problem, to be worthy of real respect, whoever they played in the playoffs. And that's gone. If Jimmy Butler's missing a couple weeks, that's gone.
And I wonder, in that situation, when Jimmy injured his knee, at that point, should they have just rested him for the rest of the game? So to come back and play 40 minutes, did he make it worse? I mean, he was, 5 for 18? So I'm thinking, hey, why not think about Friday in the back of your mind? And, hey, Jimmy, you're done for the rest of the game. That didn't look good. Just make an executive decision. So I'm wondering in hindsight, if the Miami Heat brass, front office brass, and Eric Spoelstra would have said benched him for the rest of the game and go to the locker room, get treatment, and let's get ready for Friday.
So, Coach, let me dive into that a little bit further. What are the odds that Jimmy's just not going to tell Eric Spoelstra, if you're the coach, you the truth? He's going to be like, oh, I'm fine. I'm just banged. How do you manage that if he looks like he's not right, but he's telling you it's not a big deal? I'm good to go. I'm fine.
Sometimes you got to save players from themselves. I appreciate the effort, the Herculean effort, but we got to think big picture here. We're probably not going to beat Philadelphia if Jimmy's benched and they sent him to the locker room for the rest of the game. But I just think you got to look at the whole picture and say, Jimmy, we love you. We know you're Iron Man, tough guy, but that didn't look good. A lot of times when you go back and look at replays to see whether the ball was out or in and you want to challenge your play, you can go and look at that play in real time and you can see it didn't look good.
It didn't look good. And like, I just cannot believe, at first when he went down, I'm like, man, he was clutching his knee and he was trying to run it off. And he even said afterwards, he was like, I just figured the adrenaline would kick in and it would be able to carry me through the game. And it didn't really work for me that he didn't have any explosive power at either ends of the floor. He wasn't able to do anything at either end of the floor. It's just such a shame because that game, like it wasn't a fun game for either side. It wasn't a pretty game for either side, but it was a good game in the end. And to not have a full Jimmy Butler out there to compete for the Heat was a major bummer. Also, Embiid, it took him a while to get going. That wasn't his best game either. He didn't really look like he didn't even look as
rusty.
good as he did. Yes. When he first came back, he was clutching at his shorts. He was bending over. He looked like he was gassed. I mean, he fought through it, and credit to him because that's been a knock against Joel Embiid in the playoffs for his career in Philadelphia, where it's been like, hey, he kind of disappears in these big moments. That one, that was just all effort, but he didn't look right to me.
Great fourth quarter, but yeah, he looked. Let me ask you guys a question. I thought about this, and maybe I'm picking on the 65 game rule that is required for awards in a way that I shouldn't, because I don't mind it as much as most people. But we've got Giannis now has a calf injury. We've got Zion who's hurt. We've got Jimmy who's hurt. We've got Kawhi who's out. The list is Cat just came back from an injury. I mean, and a lot of these guys played a lot of games this year relative to how often. Do you think there's a world where guys trying to hit that 65 game mark put more wear and tear on bodies that has resulted in a lot of injuries in the playoffs right now?
No, I don't necessarily believe that. I just think it's just a situation where they got injured, not because they played in more games. They're supposed to play in 82 games. The end of the day is playing, and that's the goal.
That's not what they think, Coach.
That's the goal. So I don't believe that. I just think it's unfortunate situations with all of those guys. I mean, Zion was having an outstanding game, his best game, especially as a pro, in a do or die situation against the Lakers and LeBron James, and he tweaks his hamstring at the wrong time, and he finishes the game with 40 points and 11, 12 rebounds and 6 assists. I just think it's unfortunate in the timing of it, but I don't think it has anything to do with guys wanting to play more games. They should want to play more games.
Well, when you were coaching, I mean, what was the expectation on you were saying like guys should play 82 games. Obviously, nobody's doing 82 games anymore. What was the expectation for your guys then?
I think it was the same thing. We came into the season not really thinking about resting Dirk Nowitzki or Jerry Stackhouse or Jason Terry. The goal was, let's get ready in training camp so that we can play in every game. Now, if there's a situation when a guy's injured, then he can't play. But if you're in pain, sometimes severe pain, but you can still go and play through it, then that's what the expectation is. So there was no thoughts of load management prior to the season. Now, sure, if a guy plays 52 minutes in an overtime game and you're playing back to back and you got to go from Dallas to Orlando, you lose an hour, you get in at 4:00 in the morning, you'll have to evaluate that depending on how he recovers. But the intentions were never not to play anything shorter than 82 games.
So I'm glad that you're here. Bill and I were talking about this last night, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier. First half, it's nice to have a coach on the program to walk this through with us, because first half last night, Eric Spoelstra threw the zone at the Sixers. And as you mentioned, Avery, they look like they had never seen a zone before in their life. But in previous, it was befuddling to them. It was super befuddling to me and everybody else watching it. They couldn't break the zone at all. The difference being that in previous years, and Bill can get into coaches that have coached the Sixers previously, there might not have been the required adjustments. We'll just say that. At the half, I thought Nick Nurse made some really fantastic moves throughout the game. And then also, I don't know if you caught this, Avery, but after the game, at the very end of the game, Nick Batum had a fantastic game, and including a game-clinching block at the very end. And he was asked about it afterwards, and he said, hey, right before that happened, during the timeout, the assistants came to me and showed me the exact play that the Heat ended up running, so I was prepared for it. And I just think Nick Nurse and his coaching staff have been such a boom and a boost to the Sixers. But my point here is that that coaching matchup last night was really interesting. I felt like they were really going tit for tat last night.
Yeah, it was definitely a chess match, and especially with the zone. And let me kind of temper some of the coaching with Philadelphia. All right.
Okay.
And so we're excited about Nick Nurse and the supposedly adjustments they made, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay. When you have a guy like Nicholas Batum make 6 3-point shots, okay, and
Fair.
make your threes, it makes
Fair.
your play better. Okay.
Yeah.
Coaching didn't have anything to do with Nicholas Batum making those 6 threes.
Yeah.
All right. And when he makes those 6 threes, then it opens up the middle of the floor. Then you have to cheat a little bit more towards Nicholas Batum. Then that creates more driving lanes. That sets up Embiid a little bit more. That forces the Miami Heat maybe to reconsider the zone and now play man to man. But some of those shots, contested shots that Nicholas Batum made, wasn't because of some cute play Philadelphia drew up. It's just that the
Yeah.
ball
Fair.
bounced and he made some plays. If those shots, if he goes 1 for 6 or 1 for 8 from 3, Philadelphia loses, and we're not talking about the great adjustments that coaches made for on the Philadelphia side.
Coach, that is the reality of a one-game play-in. Any statistical, the Nick Batum game can happen. It can swing the game. Not the case, obviously, in a best-of-7 series. I believe that the previous Sixers coach that John was referencing was one Doc Rivers, who obviously now coaches the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, I don't think it's a lock that they're going to get past the Pacers, especially with Giannis's injury, and play the winner of Knicks Sixers. But let's say that they do. Do you think Nurse or Thibs is going, whichever team advances, is that a significant coaching advantage against the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round if the Bucks get there? Is Doc Rivers a lesser tactical coach than the guy that replaced him or the guy that he could play if the Knicks go?
In terms of being a tactical coach, if Giannis Antetokounmpo is healthy and Damian Lillard is playing at a high level and playing similar to the way he played offensively in Portland, Doc Rivers plays and his tactical strategy will be much improved. If they play, subpar defense, if Brook Lopez doesn't make any threes, whatever plays that Doc Rivers and his staff draw up, the players have to make plays. A lot of times, I see what coaches are trying to do, and I'll say, even if the ball doesn't go in, I'll say, okay, that's a cute play. That was a nice adjustment. Yeah. But players in the playoffs, still have to make plays. Doc Rivers can draw up the cutest play known to man to get Giannis a wide open dunk. But if he gets fouled on that dunk attempt and he doesn't make his free throws, that doesn't mean that the play and the strategy wasn't correct. He just didn't make his free throws. So I think it's going to be a dynamic matchup with all of these coaches. Doc Rivers has won a championship. He's been in a lot of 7-game series of, and obviously they didn't come out on the winning side of those 7-game series. We get that. We can go back at another time and dissect what happened in a lot of those game 7s. I'm sure he would have been a better coach in game 7 against Boston if James Harden had played better. I'm sure he would have been a better coach. Okay. So, but we got dynamic coaches, Nick Nurse. We'll see what Spoelstra, is Spoelstra going to be able to pull out a victory without Jimmy Butler? And if he doesn't, does that mean, Spoelstra at home loses a game, a 1-game playoff? He's not as good as we think he is. No, he doesn't have Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think like you're absolutely right about the way that we talk about coaching, right? And how it's impacted by whether or not the players just execute. I did want to run one more thing past you guys that did not have anything to do with coaching. I don't know if this was on your radar at all. It was definitely on the Philadelphia radar, but through like the beginning part of the third quarter, the Sixers did not look good. And there was a moment in the game where Caleb Martin missed 2 free throws in the third quarter, and the fans got free chicken and lost their minds. And from that moment on, the Sixers started playing well. I can't believe a stupid food promotion helped turn around the Sixers season. That's what a dumb team that I have to follow, Avery and Bill. But before we go to break, I wanted to ask you guys, so the Sixers, obviously, it was a massive win for them. Whoever advanced, that was a huge deal because you avoid the Celtics. And that's basically the only thing that had to happen, because now who knows what happens against the Knicks. But for the two of you, how do you feel about that Knicks Sixers series?
Go ahead, Bill.
I mean, it's dead even in terms of Vegas. I know we're doing. I think the Sixers are going to win that series, but I think it's really, really close, and I think the winner of that series makes the conference finals. And I think both those teams are outstanding teams, and both those teams can be 2 seeds. Yeah, obviously, if Embiid doesn't get healthy, the Knicks are the 2 seed, and the Sixers are as the second best team in the Eastern Conference when Embiid plays. I'll go Philly, but it's going to be close.
I'm tempted to say Philly 4-1, but I'll give a little bit more respect to the Knicks. I'm going to say Philly 4-2. Okay.
Wow.
But Philly's winning that series. They have no answer for Joel Embiid. Maxi's going to put a lot of pressure on Jalen Brunson. Brunson's got to play defense in that series. They can't hide him on defense. Obviously, Julius Randle's not available. But I just think Kelly Oubre, Nicholas Batum, if he plays anywhere close to where he played, obviously, the Sixers struggled a little bit with a zone. I don't really see a zone in the Knicks defense teams. That's not. But I just think if Joel Embiid is healthy and available for every game, if he's available for the first 6 games, I have the 76ers winning in 6.
Coach, you're killing John because he doesn't
You
want
guys are
he doesn't want all this optimism. It doesn't feel right. Makes him nervous.
It does make me nervous. Very optimistic from the two of you. I'm going to reserve judgment on my prediction until tomorrow. We're going to do our predictions with.
At least we're smiling, we're laughing, we're having a good time. We talked about a chicken promotion during the Sixers game. Unlike, I don't know if you guys know this guy, but unlike the gentleman, the reporter that asked Caitlin Clark the question in that press conference,
I know, Greg Doyle.
That didn't make me smile. Okay, but at least we're smiling now.
Yes, we're smiling. This is a much more fun conversation than the one poor Caitlin had to deal with. I'm going to reserve my judgment on the prediction until tomorrow because we're going to do our predictions with Ashley.
And I reserve the right to change my mind, by the way.
Please do. I hope you do. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about the other play-in from last night. Bulls also suffered an injury against the Hawks, but the Hawks are out, so we're going to talk about what they should do this offseason. That's next, right here on Beyond the Arc.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 9, 8, 76ers.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download and subscribe and leave us a review. All right, in the other game from the Eastern Conference play-in last night, pretty easy for the Bulls. Coby White looked awesome. They beat the Hawks 131-116. Hawks were really never in this. Still no 10 seed to get out of the play-in. Coby White 42, 9, and 6. I wonder, we'll talk about this later. I wonder if he made Bill's most improved list, but he's having a hell of a season. Best points per game in his career, most rebounds per game, most assists per game, most free throw attempts, most 3-pointers made, best field goal percentage. He's played 79 games to Avery's. You got to play 82. He almost played 82. Avery played 79. Maybe things aren't as dire for the Bulls as we previously thought. The Alex Caruso injury aside, I don't know. Can they maybe get something going with Coby White and the Bulls moving forward?
Remember what I said. The goal is to play 82 games. I'm not saying
fair enough
to qualify for an award. I'm saying the goal. Yeah. So let me just clear that up. But Coby White, wow, he was really extraordinary last night, and I actually liked him. I remember we were covering the draft for CBS Sports HQ on draft night, and there was some hesitancy and thought about where he went in the draft. Should he have dropped a little bit lower? But I liked him. I liked his size. I caught a little bit of heat because I said, I compared his game to a younger, let me preference that, younger Joe Dumars. Okay? That's what I did on draft night. But see him explode. Yeah, I see him explode last night. He had it all working. Obviously, they're without Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan has been their go-to guy in the fourth quarter. But Kobe White put it all together last night from all three levels: the energy, the enthusiasm, the leadership. I was really impressed with him last night.
Bill, we talked about blowing up the Bulls so many times. Should they not blow up the Bulls?
Look, they just beat a team that was 10 games under 500 in the regular season.
Sky's the limit.
And before you tell me Trae Young missed a bunch of time, they were 10 games under 500 when Trae Young played, and in the 28 games that he missed, they were 14-14. So it's not as if they were market. So Coach is right on Kobe White. You're right. He was a stud. I will tell you whether he made that most improved ballot. The guy was amazing. DeMar DeRozan, by the way, one of the guys in consideration for clutch player of the year. And the second year that award is a thing. So they've got some pieces, but they beat a really, really bad dysfunctional basketball team. So no, I think the East, we've talked about this, is really tough. And the teams above them, including the two play-in teams, are all good enough when they're healthy to be dangerous. No, I think the Bulls have a long ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whoever gets out of that play-in is going home on vacation against the Celtics pretty soon here. I was wondering before I found out about the Caruso injury, because he's been so good for them defensively. I mean, he's a monster. It's a significant blow for them. He's got an ankle injury. Drummond stepped on his ankle. Looks like he's in doubt for the Friday game against the Heat.
Yep.
But this line opened up at Heat -3 without Jimmy, and Kobe just went for 42, 9, and 6. He's playing out of his head. No Jimmy Butler in that game. Somebody explain to me why the Heat are still favored.
I think it's just home court advantage and the respect that you have for the Heat and their culture.
Yeah.
You and Eric Spoelstra as a coach, you figure he's going to make some adjustment. It may be Patty Mills, in the rotation.
Enough.
And here comes Patty, and he goes back to his Spurs days and get a reincarnation of himself and knocks down 7 threes. And the Bulls say, where did that come from? So I think that's the key, just the respect level that people have for the Heat playing at home. They're going to get an inspiring performance from Bam Adebayo, from their bench. They need their bench in this game, from Tyler Hero. And I think and people may not believe that Kobe White can duplicate that sort of performance that he had, against a bad Atlanta team.
Yeah, and I'll just simplify it. I'll synthesize my answer and go quick. The Bulls are not a very good basketball team. The Heat are a really good basketball team. And they were 13-9 this year without Jimmy Butler. And that Bulls team was under 500 to close the season. So even without Jimmy, over the course of a significant-ish sample size, you're talking about a team that is just a better basketball team, as Coach said at home. Usually it's a home game is 1.5 points, right? You get 1.5 points usually-ish. They're 1.5 point favorites on a neutral court. The Butler thing's a blow, but John, they're better coached, and
for sure
coach. But every team that plays the Heat, I think, is up to a coaching disadvantage. They know what they're about. Obviously, Tyler Hero is healthy this year, and that team won some games without Jimmy. They know how to do it.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll have Rozier back too. We'll see. All right, I want to talk. Let's get into the team that lost. That's going home already. The Atlanta Hawks. Weird season for them. Trade deadline came around and everybody was talking about DeJounte Murray getting traded. And then Trae Young goes down. And as Bill mentioned, they ended up 14-14 when Trae Young was out. But there was a stretch there where we were talking about them where they were like 11-8, 12-8. Their defense improved considerably. And all of a sudden it looked very much like an addition by subtraction situation, not having Trae Young around, where they were giving effort. And now they're going into this offseason with a question that is going to be interesting, not just for them, but a lot of people around the NBA, a lot of teams around the NBA are going to be focused on whether or not they move Trae Young or DeJounte. So I'll throw it up for both of you. Which one would you rather have, and which one would you move?
Let me just jump in, Coach. Okay, I can just give you some reporting on this, and then I'll let you go. So I'm told that it is still true, and I had reported previously that Trae Young is not well liked in that locker room, and that was something when Quinn Snyder came in a year ago. He wanted to spend the season evaluating. And what the conclusion they came to is, from a basketball perspective and maybe some other perspectives, Murray and Trae Young can't play together. And they found out, we know this, the Hawks found out that they just can't get the return for DeJounte Murray that they thought, that they want, that they gave up when they got him from the Spurs. So Trae, I think I'm told that there's going to be a serious level of conversation and thought in the idea of moving on from Trae Young, not just because of what we saw on the basketball court, but the fact that he is not a leader in that locker room, that he is not well liked in that locker room. And I don't know who is to blame for that. There's different people that'll tell you different things, but I think it's worth noting he is not particularly popular as a part of that Hawks team. And that's been true for a while. And they thought Quinn Snyder could fix that, and he has not been able to.
Avery, what do we think? Would you move Trae?
I don't know where to start. It'll take me an hour to disseminate all of my thoughts about this team. Here's what I'll say. I don't know who thought that this Trae Young, DeJounte Murray backcourt would work in the first place. It's not going to work. DeJounte Murray is not a two guard. He is a lead guard. If you don't want to qualify him as a point guard, he's a lead guard. He needs to consistently defend point guards, not 6'6", 6'7", two guards. All right. He needs to have the ball in his hands. Trae Young needs the ball. Trae Young is not very good defensively. He's a high volume shooter. He's a high volume shooter. And the byproduct of this, because this is an organizational dysfunction to me from top to bottom. That's where they've really struggled. And you fired Nate McMillan. Why? Because he thought Trae Young should be able to participate in the game. It didn't happen. They had some issues. So the players fired Nate McMillan. Let's be real. Okay? Or one player fired. And now you bring in Quinn Snyder. You pay him 3 times more than you paid Nate McMillan. And you're not in a better situation. You really are worse off. And the bad part of this is a really good-looking young prospect, because he got drafted by the wrong team, is suffering through this mess. And that's DeAndre Hunter, who went, 3 for 16 last night.
He was awful.
And that's what happens when players of this caliber doesn't get drafted by the right team. And now his game is suffering. So I don't see anything but maybe blowing it all up, trading both DeAndre Murray and Trae Young, and just hitting the total reset button with this franchise.
And I just want to add, because this is some reporting, and people in Atlanta know this, but I don't think it's talked about in a widespread way. We talk in the NFL about dysfunctional ownership. You're right, Coach. It's all the way to the top. Tony Ressler owns that team. His son, Nick Ressler, whose primary qualification, some would argue, is being the son of a very wealthy man, Tony Ressler, basically runs basketball operations. Now, the Hawks would push back on this a little bit and say that it's more collaborative. But as I understand it, Quinn Snyder has more power than Landry Fields, who's in theory, not in theory, he's the general manager, but it's really Nick Ressler who is the power. And it was, as I'm told, it was Ressler who got rid of Travis Schlenk. That part of that changed when they fired McMillan as well. And so, to your point, it is 100% dysfunctional. It is dysfunctional from the top down. There is a sense by just the day-to-day people who run basketball ops and the coaching staff and the players that the owner, and it's the owner's son, but Nick Ressler is way too involved and doesn't know what he's doing. And maybe that's an unfair characterization of the owner's son. Maybe it's not, but you are right. It is hyper dysfunctional, just beyond the dysfunctional basketball that we all got to watch last night.
It's going to go great for the Hawks. I mean, what could go wrong? Right? You guys, it sounds like they've got everything lined up. We have to go to a break real quick before we do. I just want to throw this out here because we have Avery on. There's one of the hot rumors, Avery, is that if they do move Trae Young, that one of the potential landing spots could be the San Antonio Spurs. And I'm not sure I'm crazy about that idea. I understand from like an academic standpoint that adding offense into a team that really needs offense when you've got a defensive stopper and superstar in waiting like Wemby makes sense on paper. But what would you make of that pairing?
No, that makes sense to me. I like that pairing. I think it'd be great for Trae Young to have a fresh start, playing for a Hall of Fame coach that requires a serious amount of attention to detail. This is a totally different situation. This will be culture shock for Trae Young, and it's probably something that can be beneficial for him.
Bill, what about in the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, Coach, I was going to ask you, because my concern, and I don't know if Trae Young's the good guy or the bad guy. I just know that there are people there who don't like him, right? And That doesn't mean it's Trae Young's fault. Maybe it's a culture problem. Maybe it was a coaching issue. Maybe it's the owner's meddling. I think it's a lot of things. And I was going to ask you whether you would want to risk Trae Young just being the guy that's going to show Wemby how to be a pro. But the Greg Popovich point's a pretty good counterweight to that concern. Yeah.
Great point.
And just in closing, I've been with Trae Young since he played on the AU circuit. We had a game in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Oklahoma came and played against us at Alabama. Trae Young versus Colin Sexton. I've been knowing this kid for a long time. I just think at the end of the day, and he's friends with my son, at the end of the day, if he goes to San Antonio, it could be a life-changing experience for him, one that could really take his game to the next level.
Yeah, well, awesome. something's got to give, because as you mentioned, Avery, quite clearly, I think everybody is in accord that Trae Young and DeJounte Murray don't work together, so they got to figure something out there. We're going to take a quick break, and then I can't wait for this. Earlier in the week, we went through Bill's ballot, and Bill was like very worked up because he had very little time to get his awards ballot in. I can't wait to find out what decisions he made, who got left off, who made it. We're going to do that next right here on Beyond the Arc.
And they're starting to get in the groove. So impressive.
Block your schedules. Aces are coming to CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Please check us out on our YouTube page. You can find us at Beyond the Arc CBS. Subscribe to it, hit the like button, leave a comment. All right, Bill, I'm going to go out of order here because the last time that the three of us were on the show together, Avery made a comment, and he went, if anybody leaves Herb Jones off the first team, they're an idiot. Bill,
I think he said defensive player of the year. It's funny,
and I haven't said Bill's award.
So I brought this up on the radio show this morning with my producer. I said, Coach is going to try to fire me from my ballot. Yes, I do not.
I need to see it.
All right, you ready? Here's my order. Thank you, John. Let's just jump right into the defense. The Sixers won. Why can't we all get along? All right. All right. Here's my first team All NBA. Basically in order. Go
all NBA or all defense?
This is all NBA defense. All NBA, all defensive team. NBA all defensive team. First team.
All right.
Gobert, Wemby, AD, Bam. Mm-hmm. And I really struggled with Caruso or Jones. And Avery, your words are in my ear, but I obviously ignored them. And I went Caruso 5. And then I went, there is no top of the second team ballot, but then I went Jones, Kawhi, Derek White, Jalen Suggs. And I did end up going KCP in that fifth slot. There are a lot of guys that I consider there, and that's who I went. So Herb Jones, good news, accolades and honor. Bad news, Coach, you may have to lobby to have my vote taken away based on our previous conversation, because I did not get him on the first team. It was hard. The problem is, I'll say this, everything's positionless this year, everything.
Yes.
And so it's hard not to just take all big men on the first 4 or 5 or 6 spots just because of the impact they have on that side of the ball.
So I wish at this stage of our podcast, which I'm really enjoying, that we can ask one of the producers to basically eliminate Bill from this podcast.
Oh my God, Avery.
Kick off the podcast.
Avery, in fairness.
Not for the whole, let me finish, Bill. Not for the entire, just for the rest of this podcast today.
Okay.
Because Bill, I have a high level of respect for your basketball intellect. I know you also play the eye. The eye test is very credible and valuable to you. But Bill, there's no way in the world that you can put Alex Caruso on first team all defense in front of her. Independent. Forget about
Now, John, this is where John gets to throw me into the bus, but come to my rescue. Now, you would have put Herb Jones, if I remember, but you thought it was absolutely legitimate to put Alex Caruso on first team all defense.
I had 4 locks for my first team, and that's the 4 big men that you just rattled through, Bill. I thought that it was like pretty much you got to go Gobert and Wemby and Bam and AD, and then it was and then I was like, okay, I think it's a toss-up between Caruso and Herb Jones. I think you could make a really good case for both. I mean, we just saw Caruso before he got hurt in that last game against the Knicks in the regular season, where like that team shouldn't have even been playing, really. They were locked into the 9-10 already. And those guys were like all over the Knicks. He gave Brunson all he could handle, and Brunson still 1 for 40, but he gave all he could. All I'm saying is, for me, it was a toss-up.
Hard.
For me, it was a toss-up on that
hard.
on that first spot.
But,
yeah.
Coach, there are all kinds of
in horse racing. But I'm saying if it was horse racing, even if it was Herb Jones by a nose or a link, you're talking about a guy that can basically guard a minimum of 4 positions.
Yeah.
Okay. And on some nights when teams really downside, he can guard all 5. I mean, the deflections, the blocks, the contests. I would love to see I was with Anthony Davis and LeBron James in the hotel after my daughter's wedding in New Orleans Sunday night.
Congrats
and we had a
again.
nice conversation.
Cool.
Thank you. And Alex Caruso played with my son at Texas A&M. Love Alex Caruso. Before my son transferred and played for me at Alabama, he was at Texas A&M. So we know Caruso very well. But at the end of the day, if I was sitting there having dinner or watching LeBron drink a little glass of red wine, and I asked them, who would you take for that last spot on the first team all NBA defense? I guarantee you both of them will say Herb Jones.
So as fascinating as I'm sure people find the final part of the first ballot, first team all NBA defense, and the first spot on the second team, can I also anger you on my MVP ballot? Can we? Because I've got we got
to find out who finished 5th.
The pivot points of difficulty aren't the top of the awards.
No.
It's who do you leave off? Who's your last? And again, with no positions, there were some cop-outs back in the day where you could just say, okay, I can get this guy here because of position. So, okay, I think the top 4, I think the top 1 is easy. It's Joker.
This is for your MVP ballot?
For MVP, most valuable player. The 2 and 3, I think you could swap. You're probably not going to love it, but I went SGA over Luka. But I think you could make a case in either direction, 2 or 3. So I've got Joker 1, Shea 2, Luka 3, Giannis 4 felt really easy. The final spot was really hard. Tatum was on the list. Brunson was on the list. And I even sort of thought about Anthony Edwards. He didn't actually. I ended up going with Brunson over Tatum at 5. And I found that to be excruciatingly difficult. And in some ways, the injuries that Brunson had to overcome, the inferior basketball team, and the fact they got the 2 seed was the deciding factor. But I don't feel good about Brunson at 5. I just feel better about it than if I had left him off. That's the truth. Like, I can remember at least this, I've had this angst voting at
Tough
1.
Call.
So at least 1 was easy. But that was my ballot,
call.
Coach.
Avery, which way would you have gone for 5? Would you have gone Brunson or Tatum?
Bill, you know I love you.
Well, I can feel the love leaving.
Bill,
It's air out of a balloon.
Bill, you know I love buy you dinner during the NBA Finals. You know, when we're covering it for HQ. You know I love you, Bill.
Thank you.
Here's what
I love you too.
I would have Luka too. But like you said, it's pulling with all due respect to NBA. Yes, close. But so you don't think there's an argument for Tatum even at number 4?
I mean, I think Giannis, just looking at like the season that Giannis.
When you have the best record in the league and you've been as dominant as the team has been, you're the best player on the best team.
It's hard.
It's tough.
It's hard.
If you take Tatum off of that team for the year, for me, I think they're still a top 6 team. If you take Brunson off of that team, I don't think they're making the playoffs. Maybe they're in the play-in. Maybe they're in the
play-in.
So that it's really hard.
That is a great argument, and it's part of why, you know, like for me, Coach, all season long it was Tatum for me in the 5. And I probably, if I had a vote, I don't have a vote, I probably still would have gone with Tatum in the 5 because of what you were just saying, that he's the best player on the best team that was absolutely dominant this season. And it feels weird not to reward him for that. But Bill's argument there, and like Bill and Ashley were kind of talking me into it, where I'm like, man, the Knicks have had an unbelievable season with so many different injuries that they've had to overcome. And the reason why they ended up 2, without question, was Jalen Brunson. And it's their best season in a decade. I mean, they haven't had a 50-win season in forever. They haven't been a top 2 team in over 2 decades. It's because of that guy. His first All-Star bid. I mean, there's a case to be made.
It's really tough, Coach. I wish there were 7 spots. I wish there were. Howard Beckman.
But here's an example. This could be a good or bad example. But I was on the court pre and post game at the Final Four. I'm on the court covering the Final Four for CBS Sports HQ. After that final game with Connecticut and Purdue, because of his stats and the way he played, you easily could have voted, even though they lost, for Zach Edey to win the most outstanding player of the Final Four. Right? Easily. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, it's like LeBron's MVP case in 2015 in the finals MVP.
But you're going to reward winning. You're going to reward winning in the champion, so you pick a player from Connecticut.
You can't leave Tatum
out of the top 5. You can't leave Tatum out of the top 5.
Bill, you're just striking out, buddy.
It turns out you sure can. And by the way, I'll say this respectfully. I think you're wrong and I'm right, but I get where you're coming from. Like, I mean, I feel good about it, even though it's excruciatingly difficult to navigate. I also went Gobert over Wemby for Defensive Player of the Year, which was really tough. Really tough. But I went in part because not just the argument that Wemby's on a bad defense is not the one that swayed me. It was more that Minnesota Timberwolves team runs through its defense. And I know that obviously Ant's been amazing, but they're mediocre offensively. They are the best defensive team in the NBA. And if John wins his bet and or they make a deep run, because we have a bet on the opening series, it's going to be because of the defense largely, right? The defense 100%. Is going to be critical, and Gobert's the anchor of that. So I gave him Defensive Player of the Year. Actually, Ash talked me into Maxey over Şengün as and Kobe White was 3 as most improved.
Okay.
I went Dagnall on my Coach of the Year, but I did put Thibs on there in the end. I went Mosley 2 and Thibs 3, which means I left off Finch.
No qualms there. I want to run something else past you guys too. Most improved was there could be. I mean, there's a million guys that you could have voted for most improved, and really the only reason I'm bringing this up is because we had talked about like the rules changes, right? You have to qualify now and hit 65 games, and games has a very odd definition and our guy James Herbert at CBSSports.com just wrote about this. Dante DiVincenzo was a name that could have been considered for most improved. However, he was not eligible because of the different ways that the NBA considers games. Now, yes, this was negotiated with the NBA PA and the new CBA, but I think the rule is pretty stupid because anybody who has watched the Knicks, especially after OG and Julius Randle went down, in addition to Jalen Brunson, there were 2 other guys that were absolutely monumental for them to be in the 2 seed. It was Josh Hart and it was Dante DiVincenzo. And the fact that you can't vote for him just feels ridiculous.
John is undercutting my counter argument because he knows what it is as part of his hosting introduction. Let me say this though. I'm so put out by everybody being put out. This is a negotiated rule. Everybody knew the rule.
Dumb rule.
The rule, fine, the rule's dumb. Then the people that are actually impacted, including the Players Association, John, had to sign off on this.
They screwed it up.
Agree to the rule. Don't agree to the rule. I just got to hit 20 minutes. I mean, we can talk about whether there should be requirements for play and whether it's minutes or games. I understand where the NBA is coming from, but once they implement the rule and it's clear what the rule is, and I don't want to hear about it from people.
He played 81 games.
Then play him an extra minute in one of the games to get him to 20.
So that's the reason why, because he didn't hit a certain threshold. Bill, explain.
I didn't come up with the rule.
I know, but explain the rule because he played 81 games, but not all of the games counted as quote unquote games.
You got to get to, I think it's 20 minutes, right? If I have this right. And he played in several games. I think he came very, 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 very. And the irony being is Thibs, who plays every 48 minutes in theory.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the guy who plays in 81 games and doesn't qualify for an award like most improved. I just don't.
Yeah. What are we doing?
But we knew what the rule was.
What are we doing? We're overthinking this. This guy played 81 games for Tom Thibodeau. He made it up on the back end by playing out of 48 minutes, many games like 72 minutes.
I know we got to go because Aaron's trying to get us to stop, but let me say this. PR staffs are very good about tracking these things and trying to hound voters and send them gifts that you need to stop sending because nobody wants these things. We got to throw them away. Somebody on the Knicks staff should have been tracking this and said, oh, literally that's their job. All you got to do is say,
hey, guys, with that. Somebody on the PR staff being like,
hey, man, that's the job. I didn't choose the rules, and I didn't choose those guys going to that job at that place.
Who'd you vote for? James Dolan. Who'd you vote for? Take us out on who you voted for.
For which I voted for
most improved.
I voted for Maxey.
For Maxey for most improved.
Maxey.
Yeah.
And who was your sixth man?
Six. I went with Monk in the end for sixth man of the year, and it was really tricky because I know he's hurt. I know that he's injured.
Who else was
I just thought
sixth man?
I had Reed, I had Naz Reid as the second, I had Bogdanovich, another Nick as my third. Yeah. This was also where I think you could put those names in a bag and just pull a name out. And I don't know you can be that angry about it. And I just, in the end, I thought Monk was extraordinary. I thought he was amazing. And I thought they fell off a little bit without him. And their chances of, although they're playing, obviously they're still alive. Yeah, dude, that was there was the only easy one was MVP. Was number one.
Those are some tough calls, and despite the fact that Avery wanted to toss you off the podcast,
he doesn't love me anymore.
He soldiered through it, and he did a great job. That's so good. All right, that's going to be it for us today. We're going to be back at it tomorrow, and we're going to be on CBS Sports Network tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to check us out. We're going to preview all the playoff matchups, and we're going to give our predictions. Ashley's going to be back. But for now, for the coach who got all of the awards right, and for our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, who may or may not have gotten those awards right, I'm John Gonzalez. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.